everybody. My name is Lisa Palm, and I will be reading chapters 42 and 43 of the Ickabog for you. Now, let me share my screen so you can read along with me. Chapter 42, Behind the Curtain. The kitchens were dark and empty when Mrs. Beamish let herself in from the courtyard. Moving on tiptoe, she peeked around corners as she went, because she knew how Cankerby the footman liked to lurk in the shadows. Slowly and carefully, Mrs. Beamish made her way towards the king's private apartments, holding the little wooden foot so tightly in her hand that its sharp claws dug into her palm. At last she reached the scarlet carpeted corridor leading to Fred's rooms. Now she could hear laughter coming from behind the doors. Mrs. Beamish rightly guessed that Fred hadn't been told about the Ickabog attack on the outskirts of Shoeville, because she was sure he would not be laughing if he had. However, somebody was clearly with the king, and she wanted to see Fred alone. As she stood there wondering what was best to do, the door had opened. With a gasp, Mrs. Beamish dived behind a long velvet curtain and tried to stop it from swaying. Spittleworth and Flapoon were laughing and joking with the king as they bade him good night. "Excellent joke, your majesty. Why, I think I've split my pantaloons," guffawed Flapoon. "We should have to rechristen you King Fred the Funny, sire," chuckled Spittleworth. Mrs. Beamish held her breath and tried to suck in her tummy. She heard the sound of Fred's door closing. The two lords stopped laughing at once. "Blithering idiot," said Flapoon in a low voice. "I've met cleverer blobs of Curdsville cheese," muttered Spittleworth. "Can't you take a turn entertaining him tomorrow?" grumbled Flapoon. "I'll be busy with the tax collectors until 3, said Spittleworth. "But if—" Both lords stopped talking. Their footsteps also ceased. Mrs. Beamish was still holding her breath, her eyes closed, praying they hadn't noticed the bulge in the curtain. "Well, good night, Spittleworth," said Flapoon's voice. "Yes, sleep well, Flapoon," said Spittleworth. Very softly, her heart beating very fast, Mrs. Beamish let out her breath. It was all right. The two lords were going to bed, and yet she could hear footsteps. Then so suddenly she had no time to draw breath into her lungs, the curtain was ripped back. Before she could cry out, Flapoon's large hand had closed over her mouth, and Spittleworth's had seized her wrists. The two lords dragged Mrs. Beamish out of her hiding place and down the nearest set of stairs, and while she struggled and tried to shout, she couldn't make a sound through Flapoon's thick fingers, nor could she wriggle free. At last they pulled her into the same blue parlor where she'd once kissed her dead husband's hand. "Do not scream," said Spittleworth warned her, pulling out a short dagger he'd taken to wearing, even inside the palace, "or the king will need a new pastry chef." He gestured to Flapoon to take his hand away from Mrs. Beamish's mouth. The first thing she did was take a gasp of breath, because she felt like fainting. "You made an outsized lump in that curtain, cook," sneered Spittleworth. "Exactly what were you doing, lurking there so close to the king, after the kitchens had closed?" Mrs. Beamish might have made up some silly lie, of course. She could have pretended she wanted to ask King Fred what kind of cakes he liked her to make tomorrow. But she knew the two lords wouldn't believe her. So instead, she held out the hand, clutching the Ickabog foot, and opened her fingers. "I know," she said quietly, "what you're up to." The two lords moved closer and peered down at her palm, and the perfect tiny replica of the huge dark footers were using. Spittleworth and Flapoon looked at each other and then at Mrs. Beamish, and all the pastry chef could think when she saw their expressions was, "Run, Burt, run!" Chapter 43, Burt and the Guard. The candle on the table beside Burt burned slowly downwards while he watched the minute hand creep around the clock's face. He told himself his mother would definitely come home soon. She'd walk in any minute, pick up his half-darned sweater as though she'd never dropped it, and tell him what had happened when she saw the king. Then the minute hand seemed to speed up, when Burt would have done anything to make it slow down. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes left. Burt got to his feet and moved to the window. He looked up and down the dark street. There was no sign of his mother returning. But wait! His heart leapt. He'd seen movement on the corner. For a few shining seconds, Burt was sure he was about to see Mrs. Beamish step into the patch of moonlight, smiling as if she'd caught sight of his anxious face at the window. And then his heart seemed to drop like a brick into his stomach. It wasn't Mrs. Beamish who was approaching, but Major Roach, accompanied by 4 large members of the Ickabog Defense Brigade, all carrying torches. Burt leapt back from the window, snatched up the sweater from the table, and sprinted to his bedroom. He grabbed his shoes and his father's medal, forced up the bedroom window, clambered out of it, and then gently slid the window closed from the outside. As he dropped down into the vegetable patch, he heard Major Roach banging on the front door, and then a rough voice said, "I'll check the back." Burt threw himself flat in the earth behind a row of beetroots, smeared his fair hair with soil, and lay very still in the darkness. Though his closed eyes, he saw flickering light. A soldier held his torch high in hopes of seeing Burt running away across the other people's gardens. The soldier didn't notice the earthly shape of Burt concealed behind the beetroot leaves, which threw long, swaying shadows. "Well, he hasn't gone out this way," shouted the soldier. There was a crash, and Burt knew Roach had broken down the front door. He listened to the soldiers opening cupboards and wardrobes. Burt remained utterly still in the earth, because torchlight was still shining through his closed eyelids. "Maybe he cleared out before his mother went to the palace." "Well, we have to find him," growled the familiar voice of Major Roach. "He's the son of Ickabog's first victim. If Burt Beamish starts telling the world the monster's a lie, people will listen. Spread out and search. He can't have gone far. And if you catch him," said Roach as his men's heavy footsteps sounded across the Beamish's wooden floorboards, "kill him. We'll work out our stories later." Burt lay completely flat and still, listening to the men running away up and down the street, and then a cool part of Burt's brain said, "Move." He put his father's medal around his neck, pulled on his half-darn sweater, and snatched up his shoes, and then began to crawl through the earth until he reached a neighboring fence, where he tunneled out enough dirt to let him wriggle beneath it. He kept crawling until he reached a cobbled street. But he could still hear the soldiers' voices echoing through the night as they banged on doors, demanding to search houses, asking people whether they had seen Burt Beamish, the pastry chef's son. He heard himself described as a dangerous traitor. Burt took another handful of earth and smeared it over his face, and then he got to his feet and, crouching low, darted into a dark doorway across the street. A soldier ran past, but Burt was now so filthy that he was well camouflaged against the dark door, and the man noticed nothing. When the soldier had disappeared, Burt ran barefooted from doorway to doorway, carrying his shoes, hiding in shallowy alcoves, and edging ever closer to the city within the city gates. However, when he drew near, he saw a guard keeping watch, and before Burt could think up of a plan, he had to slide behind a statue of King Richard the Righteous, because Roach and another soldier were approaching. "Have you seen Burt Beamish?" they shouted at a guard. "What, the pastry chef's son?" asked the man. Roach seized the front of the man's uniform and shook him like as a terrier shakes a rabbit. "Of course the pastry chef's son! Have you let him through the gates? Tell me!" "No, I haven't," said the guard. "And what's the boy done to have you lot chasing him?" "He's a traitor," snarled Roach, "and I'll personally shoot anyone who helps him. Understood?" "Understood," said the guard. Roach released the man, and he and his companion ran off again, their torches casting swinging pools of light on the walls until they were swallowed once more by the darkness. Burt watched the guards straighten his uniform and shake his head. Burt hesitated. Then, knowing this might cost him his life, crept up out of his hiding place. So thoroughly had Burt camouflaged himself within all the earth that the guard didn't realize anyone was beside him until he saw the whites of Burt's eyes in the moonlight, and then let out a yelp of terror. "Please," whispered Burt, "please don't give me away. I need to get out of here." From beneath his sweater, he pulled his father's heavy silver medal, brushed the earth from the surface, and showed the guard. "I'll give you this. It's real silver. If you just let me out through those gates and don't tell anyone you've seen me. I'm not a traitor," said Burt, "and I haven't betrayed anyone, I swear." The guard was an older man with a stiff gray beard. He considered the earth-covered Burt for a moment or two before saying, "Keep your medal, son." He opened the gate just wide enough for Burt to slide through. "Thank you," gasped Burt. "Stick to the back roads," advised the guard, "and trust no one. Good luck."